Hey, mate.
Hey Andrew, how are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
Yeah, very good, thanks, mate.
Excellent. Good to hear. How's your week been?
Yeah, very good actually. Busy.
Yeah, and we're only on Tuesday, right?
Yeah, doesn't feel like it. Hey, getting on?
Yeah. Yeah, good. Good. Yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of movement at the moment. It's always a bit of an odd time of the year in this part of the world as far as summer and kind of people traveling away from this terrible heat. But I think this year, obviously, with some of this travel uh, chaos, that people are kind of saying, "No, I'm staying here." So it's good from a business perspective. Things still moving. A lot of kind of good conversation. So
Yeah.
all good as it were. I think just as we've got a few people joining us, so welcome guys. So just while they kind of populate in, welcome to the Grocery guys. Been doing this now for over just over a year, I guess, and we are currently slap bang in the middle of our summer series. Right, so we decided to kind of tackle some of those topics that we originally spoke about way back when, and just kind of have a bit of a revisit, right? Because as we'll kind of dig into today, things are continually changing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just the nature of the topic, I guess. I mean, today's deep dive is really kind of focused on sort of sales and business growth, and I think it's a mammoth topic. I think we'll start talking about that in a few minutes, um, but it's always one which changes. I think even our sort of narrative on the whole sort of topic evolves over time, right? I mean, I think even the
Yeah,
conversations we were having, well, I think especially the conversations we were having this time last year, I think we were right in the middle of the worst of COVID, I think. But what
mm,
we, in terms of how we talk about it right now is very different. So yeah, so I think it'll be good session today. I'm looking forward to it.
yeah. Happy days. And just before we kind of get into that, guys, just while we wait for people to kind of rock up and join in, because we've got people jumping in from different time zones. We tend to take a bit of a stab at the news and kind of see what's kind of caught our eye generally. So just to get that out. Excellent. Yeah, we've got a few guys here. Jason's just said good morning there, Jason. Just that will reminds us that we do have chat, we do have Q&A throughout the session today. Any kind of questions you want to ask, just come through while there's some random dude walking across back your garden. So we've got obviously an opportunity to be interactive as well. So guys, any questions that you may have pop up. Does the gardener join in occasionally? He does occasionally join in. Yeah, he jumps in and he offers his advice. So yeah. As far as kind of what caught your eye this week, was there anything you had, or if not, I had something a bit weird to start off with.
Oh yeah, go on, you start off.
Yeah, I just this kind of interested me in two ways. First of all, there's an app that's out there for this, which quite surprised me. So Apple have just recently banned an app, and it's Tinder for anti-vaxxers. Um, so it's called Unjected, as in you haven't had the jab, I guess. So this, believe it or not, is a dating app in the States that basically kind of gained popularity, especially in the US, where if you wanted to be safe with someone who's not vaccinated. I don't quite understand the kind of promotional wording there, but Apple essentially pulled it. So Apple pulled it from the store. Android, it's still available. And Apple, have kind of cited misinformation of COVID. That's why it's kind of against its policy. So it has broken a policy. But I just found it interesting. First and foremost, just there's some nutters out there, so it's always amusing when you find this. But secondly, just the whole kind of censorship approach to essentially it's an organization that's determining what goes out there. We saw it with QAnon during the whole Trump administration, and how it gradually gets, I think what they call it in the States is deplatformed. And I think that's a term that we wouldn't have known 2 years ago. And then it seems like, it starts on one and then kind of rolls through. So I just wanted your thoughts on it as far as that deplatforming.
Yeah, so well, with the deplatforming side of it, look, the reality is ultimately Apple and Google and Facebook and those guys, you know, they have immense amounts of control, right, in terms of what they want people to see.
Yeah.
And I, you know, we've spoken about it a few times. You know, how much of a problem that is, I think we'll still find out at some point. But for now, look, it's they're doing what they need to do, I guess. The it was quite interesting because, you know, you obviously went straight for, you know, the term nutters. Because I was, well, when you were talking about it, I was just literally, I was like, is he going to go for the diplomatic approach, or is he just going to go straight in? Because I know, you know, what we privately both think, but it's quite nice for you to just go out there. And that movement itself is quite strange. So I've joined a few anti-vax Facebook groups and business groups. I just wanted to see what was going on. I just want to
Even
kind
though
of
you're
understand
double jabbed.
I've had 4 jabs. It's like, I mean, I've had every jab possible. But it's funny. I mean, when you look at it, and there's people out there saying, look, if I'm going to hire, you know, a service provider for my business now, the first thing I ask them is, have they been vaccinated? And if they say yes, I don't work with them. You know, and it's stuff like that, and you're just like, this is just, I don't know. I was talking about it the other day over a few drinks with some friends, and literally, I almost likened it because I watched Demolition Man with the kids, that older Sylvester Stallone and
amazing,
Wesley Snipes film.
Yeah,
and do you remember these? So do you remember the kind of underworld people?
That's right, Dennis Leary.
Right, yeah, exactly. The guys who are eating rat burgers because there's no food for them in the real world, sort of thing. It's kind of it's a little bit scary. It's a little bit scary because it feels like it's the early stages of that, where they want nothing to do with vaccinated people, and you know, we've all been, you know, taken over and had stuff implanted in us and all sorts, apparently. But anyway. Yeah,
that's interesting.
So,
I think that there's kind of on the you know, the flip side of that, especially when it comes to, it's just going to become a reality now when it comes to things like travel, when it comes to, you know, things like restaurant business and all that kind of stuff, right? You know, it's one of those things. So I think that the challenge is that, you know, I think especially in the US, there does seem to be more of a movement, and I'm guessing a lot of these groups from the US, although some might be in the UK, but it seems to be a vocal minority that mix sometimes different, you know, whatever it may be, politics, emotions, etc., into a business environment. So it's quite. The one thing I haven't seen at the moment is I haven't seen that activity on LinkedIn. So I haven't kind of seen any of that public kind of, you know, rhetoric on LinkedIn. So I think it'd be interesting if that spills over to there.
Yeah, I don't know if it will. I think it's just because Facebook just allows communities, right, to form groups. You know, where people can be very kind of open and stuff like that. But it's, I don't know. It's bigger than what we think it is. I think is the point. You know, there's thousands of people in these groups, and they're very vocal, right? It's almost back in the, I mean, you know, very kind of British reference, but this feels very much like Brexit again, right? Where you've got, you know, it's 2 very different sides, and there's not much middle ground, right?
Fair enough. So yeah. I mean, more importantly, like, all of your friends on Facebook think that you're an anti-vaxxer because you've joined all these anti-vax groups. So I mean, that's probably.
I had one of my friends reach out to me and say, "Oh, you know, it's great to see you on that group." And I'm like, "Oh shit!" Like, I mean, this is, you know, I forget that people can see all that stuff.
That's it. Amazing.
But anyway,
good stuff. So look, to kind of go down a more serious note, I guess. The other thing that caught my eye was just the amount of money that is still out there from a funding perspective for startups. And this kind of number popped out, and I don't know if you saw this, but Nvidia, which I think has done actually pretty well for me when I've had some shares of theirs. But that's kind of the chip manufacturer. You know, they have got they're tracking 8,500 AI, specifically AI startups. But what blew me away was that in total there's $60 billion worth of funding associated to these 6,500 AI startups, and they're saying there's huge growth in kind of healthcare, medical, pharma, and IT. And I guess that obviously with the craziness that is going on at the moment, it's positive to still hear that you know there's progression, there's movement in that startup space, and obviously it's being funded as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, the AI kind of slash virtual side of it just makes sense, and I think if anything, it's just been highlighted further in the last 18 months, right? So yeah, I can see where that's got people excited. Cool. I've got one very quick one, and I think we should just jump straight into the topic in a sec. But I kind of stumbled across it a couple of days back, but Boeing are kind of joining the space race again, and I think it's something that they've kind of played around with for a while. But now you've got all of these companies like NASA and people like that now looking for cargo companies. You know, basically people that can fly cargo over to into space, and you know, SpaceX and people like that are all over that space, right? They want that kind of B2B business, but Boeing are now jumping back into it, and
Right.
I don't know, it feels a bit weird. It feels almost like Kodak kind of missing out on the digital camera side of it, you know, because now they're up against, you know, these guys who've just probably got more money than them to throw at it. I mean, Bezos on his own probably got more money to throw at this than Boeing has as an organization, right? So so I think, yeah, it's quite interesting just to kind of watch his space and see what happens with them. I as a company, I absolutely love Boeing. You know, I think they've got a lot of kind of good things that they do. We work with them from a sort of CSR perspective, and I love what, you know, their sort of community involvement and stuff is huge. So I'd love for this to work for them. But yeah, just want to keep an eye on.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's you said you got Blue Origin, you got SpaceX. I mean, and it is. I think that's one of the things that got possibly potentially missed from Jeff Bezos. You know, a bit of a backlash as far as him kind of going up there. First and foremost, yes, it is his money, but actually, it's a business. They're running it as a business. This is, you know, he's not doing this for fun. I feel like Branson, again, that's business, but it's tourism. So, you know, I think it's interesting that you've got one of those old establishments that they probably own a whole bunch of patents, right? So Kodak reinvented themselves with patents, right? They started to kind of, you know, turn the curve when so they licensed a whole lot of patents. So I wonder if guys over at Boeing have got anything hanging around rocket wise.
Yeah, no, it's actually be interesting. So cool. Look, guys, we've got, I think everyone who's going to join. So great to have you aboard with us this morning. I think we've got to say hi to the podcasters because I forget how many people listen to that. There's a lot. So we never say hi to them. So look, thanks for listening and thanks for watching. So just to recap, so today we're going to be talking really about kind of fast tracking sales success and alongside that sort of business growth. I think what's interesting, Andrew, when we kind of were sort of ideating these sessions, I don't know how this one kind of slipped through the net because we would never typically put sales success and then business growth in the same session, purely because it tends to be a 45 to 50-minute session when we start talking about these things. And both of those are absolutely huge kind of topics, right? And then I think the other reason when, you know, that we normally separate those is I think we've got to distinguish between sales success and business growth, right? Because I think there's a kind of natural, I don't know, feeling or opinion or whatever it is, right? Where you feel as if, okay, look, if you do have sales success, then you are going to achieve business growth. But I think both of us have seen and worked with companies in the past where actually from a sales perspective, we're absolutely flying, but is the business growing? No, right? And I think that's what's really kind of opened our eyes, you know, in terms of really differentiating between the two. So I think it'd be kind of, I think it'd be a good session today just to really kind of tackle those head on. I think obviously for us to be as sort of tactical and really, I think straight to the point, I think we just need to because of the time constraints. But I felt what we could do, and tell me if you disagree, but if we start with the sales side of it and then transition into the impact of sales into business growth and what ultimately does lead to true business growth. Good with that?
Yeah, sounds like a good plan.
Okay, cool. So, all right, so over to you, Andrew. Let's talk about sales.
Amazing. That's good. No, I liked it. I like the fact that it was just a very Olympic theme handing off the baton there. So good news. Yeah, cool. So look, I think as you rightly mentioned there at the beginning, that sales numbers, sales growth, sometimes can be negative. There's a thought process that believes that obviously increasing the sales ultimately will lead to that growth. And I just want to touch upon this with one of very kind of the first conversations that we usually have around lead generation, around increasing sales with clients, is the fact that we kind of want to understand, what does their kind of catchment area look like. So if you start this activity, are you able to essentially fulfill the orders? Are you able to handle that volume of clients? And I think that again is usually what people don't think about. So it's kind of what would be the impact of sales success, and what type of sales kind of do we want to kind of pull off from that. So kind of what we've got kind of looked at is essentially, when we look at that sales success, I think we kind of come kind of break it down to some pillars. Yeah. So I think if we kind of take a bit of a run through of those pillars and kind of perhaps have a bit of a chat around some of those. Interestingly enough, I think the first pillar that we should touch upon is people. Look, the only reason that you and I are sitting here opposite each other is because our relationship started talking about salespeople. That was it. And the challenges associated to hiring, keeping, what's the structure to kind of keep those individuals engaged. And then back in the day, obviously, there was very little technology associated to sales. It was more a people-driven business. And I'd say that the people aspect is still something that kind of needs to be considered first and foremost. As far as who these individuals are. Now, if we look at over previous months and weeks where we've discussed how the consumer is changing, where you and I are changing, either in a B2B or B2C space, I think we need to look at that, from that individual that is going to be selling or generating business, because the way that they kind of perhaps operated previously has to change as well. So, if we take the car salesman example, right, back in the day, you'd have to have a highly knowledgeable individual that kind of take you through, this aspect, whereas now, obviously, YouTube videos and everything else associated to that, and that whole ZMOT, we go back to ZMOT as far as, people, researching for themselves. When they ultimately go to buy something, they're usually more informed. So I think the role of an individual in sales success is still key. But I think, more often than not now, the skill set of those individuals has kind of evolved, right? Yeah. I mean, what do you reckon on that, as far as kind of how
for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Because I think that the I've been in sort of sales training sessions where people in the sales managers and sales directors said, look, all I want is my team to ultimately know more than the potential customer they're talking to, right? And even if I know a little bit more, that kind of puts them in a good position. The challenge is people who are buying now know more than they've ever known, right? Because of technology, and because they know exactly what they're buying, they know why they're buying, they know the use cases, they know, they kind of know all of this stuff, because all of that information and reviews and all of that kind of stuff is out there, right? And it's in their hand. So for sure, I think that side of it's evolved. But I think if we also look at the people side of it, in terms of, okay, why have salespeople had to evolve even more? It's because buyer behaviors have changed, right? So the people who are buying have really kind of changed. And I think that's where if we look at how the people aspect of this has evolved, it's really, I think, more from the buyer side. And at the moment, I mean, like all the conversations that we have, it's where we're trying to almost fast track the learning of salespeople to understand that buyers have changed versus the other way around, right? I mean, so it's almost like you've got one which is outpacing the other in terms of, evolving and learning and developing, even if the buyers don't understand that they're changing. But I know, I mean, like when you actually ask that question and say, look, the way that you bought something, say 10 years ago, compared to how you buy something today, like if you really break that down, I think people get surprised, by literally how different those behaviors are now. And I think, sales is one of those roles where it is just ever changing, right? And if you understand that, I don't know, it's almost like you've got to understand it. You've got to stay one step ahead as a salesperson. And it's probably one of the only departments in an organization where you just constantly have to think on your feet. That, if you can achieve that, then ultimately you're going to do better. Right. And then I think the only other sort of change, and we'll relate that back to people, is closing skills. I think today are probably more important than ever, because if you do have a customer that's coming up to you and they're empowered enough to know what they're buying, why they're buying it, what the cost should be, then it comes down to the salesperson not to sell them that product, but essentially close the deal, right? The selling part of it might have already been done through online research and content and marketing and all those things. Now it's just deal closing, right? So I think salespeople now really should be evolving into just kind of full-time deal closers, I think, in an ideal world.
Yeah, I think also that just with that volume of data that's out there nowadays, not only around educating yourself about the particular product or service that you're looking at, but there's also a whole host of data around the buying process and the role of the business development team and how to secure yourself the best deal. And so there's as much information that's being shared with the prospect that there is now with the kind of the business development side. So that business development role is kind of more evolving into that consultative piece as well. So it's ultimately, as you said, understanding and what deal to close, but really what to close, if that makes sense. Because also the flip of that is that people are educating themselves, but sometimes there's a bit of a mismatch with that information they've gained or learned versus what actually is associated to that, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Actually, I had a conversation with someone last week about this, because they were like, look, it's changed. People are now coming into, they contact us and they already know everything about what they want to buy. But the problem is they've learned that from other people's information and websites and content, and sometimes they're reading the wrong information, right? Because I think it goes back to that whole thing. If like you ask my kids who are like 12 and 11 now, and you ask them anything, if they don't know the answer, they go to Google, and they kind of almost just assume that what Google tells them is correct, right? Yeah. And that's obviously very dangerous when maybe it's not 100% correct in terms of the content you're reading. Yeah. So I think, and actually my solution to those guys last week was, well, why let people educate themselves on other people's websites? Why don't you try and do that? Why don't you create that content so that they're researching and educating themselves on your website? And so when they speak to you, you guys are very much aligned in terms of thinking and mindset. I was like, then you're not having to re-educate them. And then we kind of came up with a bunch of different ways of doing that. But the point is like, if they're going to research online and they're going to do it, we know all the data points that way. Well, get them to research in your house as opposed to someone else's, right?
Yeah. Take ownership of it.
Yeah.
And I think this kind of falls in line with that kind of next piece associated to people, and it's kind of that process environment now. So the fact is that when we go into organizations and kind of see their business development team or their sales team and how they're currently operated, a lot of the time the gaps or the areas around sales success is really down to process. And or lack of it, or over processed. I think famously kind of sales individuals and business development hate administration. It's kind of this thing that's burned into administration. Is impactful on sales. Don't you want me selling? Don't you want me out there? Why should I be filling out a form? Why should I be filling out this? And I think the thing is that that old school approach is changing. But a lot of that is driven by process now and how that goes. Now, look, I think what goes hand in hand with process is technology. So the previously, long kind of process driven sales environment was very administrative heavy. and obviously, you know, from as far as prospecting and follow up and that whole kind of sales process, you know, if we look at that, was very administrative and kind of very manually intensive. Now, obviously, there are tools, you know, out there to kind of manage people's time better. I think, you know, something that always, as simple as it sounds, you know, for kind of any kind of team that we go and talk to, just something as simple as a meeting scheduler, you know, where you generate a link and share that with your prospects or your customers and allow them to kind of choose a time to sit with you, is kind of revolutionary, you know, as opposed to back and forth on WhatsApp and emails, etc. You know, kind of wasting time. So I think some of the technology piece obviously is also really core to that success. I mean, I was blown away yesterday. I'd sat with a financial institute, very well-known financial institute. They've just launched a new service going after a particular segment. I think it's a phenomenal product offering that they're putting out there. I was like, okay, excellent. What do you have in place? You know, you've got a big team here. What are the guys working on? They said Excel. So, you know, I mean, you're talking millions of dollars has gone in product development, and yet they're still running off of an Excel sheet as far as, you know, they're kind of an afterthought, right?
Yeah, look, and I think when you're talking about process, I mean, it's fine, right? But tons and tons of businesses kind of work off Excel sheets, because it does help to does help to sort of create some level of process, right? But you've got to log this information, and you know, you've got a track of something. I know between us, we have seen some of the most beautifully complex Excel sheets that you could ever imagine. You know, where you've literally got thousands of customer records and deal stages mapped into it, and tons of pivot tables linked into it. And you just look at it going, like, you sit back and admire that, and then you kind of say to them, I could probably get that transitioned into a CRM within a day, which then does all of this for you.
Yeah.
But you know, the point is that Excel does work, and you know, and I think process is the key. I think let's talk about us, right? So imagine, I mean, we look at sales, and we look at sales processes, and we look at all that. We've been doing this for over 16 years now, right? And yet, what internal activity is happening right now? I mean, where's a lot of our team? We've got 5 or 6 people working on this at this moment in time, right? But what you know, we're working on, again, that whole kind of refinement of our sales processes, you know, from start to finish, right? And again, this is such a big activity and exercise, even for a small business like ours. But I think the point is even though I think we're quite happy with our sales process, it's still not 100%. And I never know if it's ever going to be 100%. But you know, I think our job is to just kind of make sure we inch closer to that kind of, you know, level of perfection where we do absolutely everything right. But it's just an ever kind of, you know, ever changing sort of animal in some respects, because things are changing around us, right? It's not just, you know, sales isn't a one-dimensional thing where we create sales and then suddenly everyone buys from us. Those people that are buying from us keep changing. So we're going to have to keep changing our approach, right? And we have to keep an eye on what's happening around us with our competitors, and say, right, what aren't they doing, and how do we do things better? And so this process will never stop.
No.
You know, I think finding that process is great, but then you're just going to have to keep kind of refining it and improving it, and ultimately that would lead to kind of sales success, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, as you said, it evolves, right? And this is kind of where we look at some of that technology piece, because I feel as though sometimes the business development side or sales side is not given the love that perhaps marketing is given. You know, it's very much we just get out there and sell, right? And again, it goes back to you know, looking at just realizing some of those tools. So back to some of the technology, the ability to understand if people are communicating, opening your emails, reading your proposals, watching your videos, etc. You know, following up through automated activities, still personalized, but allowing you to, you know, move away from the post-it notes on your desk as far as follow-up to making sure that things are kind of being taken care of in the background. And I think, quite frankly, some of the challenge I find with a lot of, sales success is that the sales team is being asked to perform miracles, literally running off the back of nothing. So there's just an expectation that you kind of just crack on with it, right? So you're not giving any real benefit from it. So when that kind of when I talk about that technology, I think it's more about that intelligence piece. So obviously what we see through HubSpot, especially that we work with, but obviously other kind of tools out there, it's just that intelligence piece, allowing the sales professional to know where to focus their energies and effort and attention, right? As far as the prospects and even from a customer retention and increasement perspective.
Yeah, 100%. Look, I think when you look at that intelligence piece, I think that's the equalizer for salespeople, right? That's where I think salespeople now have slightly more of an advantage, or a bit more of a kind of upper hand in that sales process, as long as they're following that process. And I think just to kind of explain that a bit further, I mean, Andrew mentioned earlier about being able to track proposals, and whether someone's watching your video, someone's visiting your website. And I think having that ability as a salesperson to kind of understand that that person I'm speaking to is engaged, right? They're engaged in this process. That's something that 10 years ago we just didn't have access to, right? You just wouldn't be able to know if that person that you're having good conversations with, are they just kind of taking you along for the ride, or are they actually serious buyers? You'd never be able to differentiate that. And I think that intelligence piece now is really that big differentiator. And we were talking about how buyers have a lot more sort of control and power and access to information. The equalizer part of this is where salespeople can actually have more sales intelligence, right? And so therefore, gives them an opportunity really to focus on the right people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, and like you said, I mean, I think the thing is that as much as people are educating themselves and obviously taking that time to discover what they really need, there still is that requirement for that kind of personal touch, and that only really goes about based on that technology piece. So look, I mean, for when we're looking at initial kind of prospecting, the ability to understand what those individuals are interested in, if you're offering a wide selection of products and services, is valuable, right? So as you said, having that upper hand, or having the ability to at least form the conversation correctly with the prospect is ultimately going to help you, right? And I think that that intelligence piece, a lot of the time, is not implemented, right? We've kind of even seen organizations with extensive sales operations that don't use any kind of intelligence on their kind of entire sales process. So what I mean, for example, even down to basic access to what the amount of visitors that are coming in, what content people are reading, so we talk about this disconnect a lot, but there's a disconnect between the information that actually is being captured and the information that's being shared. So a lot of the time, there's data on website visits or brochure downloads or whatever the case may be, and none of that is being shared with the business development team. And look, a lot of the time, business development team may be blissfully unaware that this even exists, or there may even be internal. We've seen it previously where internally, those departments are not allowed to talk to each other. So the challenge therein, there's how much intelligence can I pull, how much intelligence can I kind of capture and kind of grab from there as well,
Yeah, 100%. I think, look, it's such a good point. The data sharing, the alignment between marketing activities and sales activities. I mean, all of this needs to be there. We deal with a company that has 20 different product lines, and sales weren't ever informed of the data that marketing had, right? So if somebody, imagine someone's kind of going on a website and they are researching, there's a ton of content, and they visited 30 pages prior to getting in touch with sales would want to know which pages have been viewed, right? Which case studies that person's seen, what content have they downloaded, and that whole intelligence piece was completely missing. The second sales know that information, well, instead of going in there and saying, hey, we've got 20 different products, they've now got the ability of saying, well, actually, from those 30 pages that that person's looked at, 20 of those pages are for this one specific product line. So I'm just going to focus on that product. I know they've seen this case study, so I'm going to reference that case study, right? Let's work with familiarity. Let's not try and sell them something that they're not interested in. Let's focus on what we know they're interested in because the data says that. Companies typically either, but even, but sometimes they don't know it's available because they, again, there's clients that, we've worked with who have kind of intelligent systems in place, but don't even realize what's kind of under the bonnet when they, in terms of data. So I think it's just kind of understanding that. And if that kind of information is impactful and can help sales, I think sometimes it's just putting a simple process in just to make sure that that information is being shared.
Yeah, like you said, right? People are kind of blissfully unaware, right? So this kind of falls on that space where it's like, I didn't know that was available. I didn't know I had that information. I look, famously, I think look, there's a guy that we probably haven't mentioned on this growth show. We've mentioned him in passing, but you and I both know him, and that's kind of Marcus Sheridan, right? And he famously, for the guys that are listening and watching the show, I think, definitely kind of Google Marcus Sheridan and kind of sometimes known as the pool guy. But he has this great story, around the fact that kind of, where he managed to sell a pool, as it were, in his kind of previous life, although I think he's still got that business, with just knowing that this prospect had read every single bit of information about that. And interestingly, we had a client that essentially was involved in the space that it's a very large purchase. So let's say, we're talking about a purchase, a personal investment of $10 million plus. And we managed to capture 3 years worth of data around that particular prospect. And because it was such a large investment, this particular prospect had been looking at their purchase over the course of 3 years. And going into finite detail as far as how they were going to personalize this kind of huge investment, and when obviously they ultimately filled the form and said, hey, listen, I want to speak to someone. There was an entire kind of sales playbook that was presented to the sales team to say, look, this is what this guy wants. He wants this color, this trim, and kind of a full breakdown. So I think, usually it's a spark of, oh, okay, I didn't realize this existed, and now you kind of move into that space. So it definitely enables you to kind of close faster, as it were, when it comes into that, So I mean, look, yeah. I think from a kind of sales success piece, we've obviously kind of spoken about this a lot as far as over the last kind of few weeks and last year, I guess, as far as what determines sales success. But if we kind of look at how that works against growth, and how that's different. You kind of highlighted it there at the top of the show, but I mean, why? I'll ask you why. I mean, look, if you kind of if we've ultimately, yeah.
Can I go back? I think we've missed one kind of important pillar, and I think it's a super important one because it's a little bit still kind of old school. But speed, right? I think it's one of those where the faster you react still to a sales opportunity, the better chance you have of winning. And all the data, so much data about that, right? You increase your chances by 80% or whatever it is by, responding to a new inquiry within 5 minutes. I just want to touch on that a second because I think technology alongside speed is kind of critical. And I think one of the things is obviously understanding data and that kind of intelligence. But we've been testing a few things with WhatsApp, okay? And I think WhatsApp is a serious game changer when it comes to lead generation now and also online stuff. So again, if you've got a kind of business, whether it's a small business or an even larger business, have a think about how WhatsApp can really kind of impact that lead generation and speed basis. Because we've put WhatsApp and forms, like typical website forms, side by side. And I think the way we are now, when we're so sort of conscious of time, is, well, if I fill out a form, that's maybe 7 or 8 fields of information I've got to put stuff in. Or if I just basically click on the WhatsApp button, I can just speak to someone straight away. And what kind of got me thinking over this was actually just before I traveled in the summer, and I needed some new Nest devices put in the villa, and I was just looking for somebody to do it, and I went on to 2 or 3 different websites. Naturally, just went straight to the WhatsApp side of it because I wanted it done, like, within a day or so. And it was a person that responded the fastest that won the business, and it was that straightforward. And the other people who didn't respond at time, they actually responded within about 7 or 8 minutes. But in those 7 or 8 minutes, I'd already made my decision, because literally the person responded and said, "What are you looking for?" So I need 2 Nest devices. What's the cost? There, do you have availability? Yes. When can you come and do it? We can come tomorrow morning. Okay, done. And within 2 minutes, that whole process was done. And actually, one of the people, I said, "Look, I'm really sorry. Like, someone responded faster than you," and so they got a business, and they were like, "But you only sent an inquiry 5 minutes ago," and I was like, "It was done." But I think that's one of those where I think just speed and technology, and when that becomes aligned, and there's a whole load of ways of doing this, like, whether you automate it with chat bots and stuff like that using WhatsApp. But I genuinely think it's something to explore, and it might be something from B2B perspective to also explore, because again, how many B2B companies are really focusing on WhatsApp sales versus not? So just wanted to kind of throw that out there as well.
Yeah, no, look, I think for some of our listeners and viewers that perhaps are based elsewhere in the world, WhatsApp in the Middle East is another communication tool now from a business perspective. So it's very blurred, the lines, from a kind of personal and business type environment. What I would say is that we've noticed that. So, for example, most of the sales teams that we work with, their challenges that their sales guys and girls are using WhatsApp to communicate to their prospects. So it's happening already. So and that's at an individual sales level. And what's interesting is most of those organizations don't have a WhatsApp for Business account or someone managing that. I also think as well, in that environment, talking to that effect, you got to make sure the right individual is on the end of that WhatsApp, right? Because ultimately, I guess if you'd contacted them and say, "Listen, I'm interested in this, this, and this," and you said, "Yeah, great, no problem, we'll get back to you, within 2 hours," that kind of defeats the object. So, I look, famously or unfamously, my WhatsApp, I get a lot of WhatsApps, right? My number is on the website. And I see an increasing amount of individuals and prospects that reach out over WhatsApp versus calling. And I think also, think that a lot of the time some businesses just won't pick up the phone, believe it or not, or they won't call you back. Whereas it's actually quite difficult to ignore a blue tick on a WhatsApp, right?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's staring in the face.
Cool. All right. So just I think just let's kind of, sorry, and I apologize for jumping in there, Andrew. But basically, I think let's look at the growth side of it. And I think I knew we'd have an issue with time, but essentially, we spoke about it right at the beginning of the show, where we were saying, look, sales success ultimately isn't a direct link to business growth. And again, I think we kind of refer back to how many times we've kind of seen this, where people are really kind of successful from a sales perspective, got processes in place, the right kind of team and all of those things, and their sales is growing, but their business isn't growing. And ultimately, what tends to happen at that point is sales get even more pressure on them. But I guess what we were getting at here is when we kind of look at your kind of growth chart, or your growth graph, what everyone's trying to really kind of achieve is a graph that kind of looks like that, right? Where you've got a nice kind of steep kind of slope, and things are kind of moving at a sort of good pace. The challenge when you haven't got certain other aspects in place, and what we're talking about here is the operational stuff, right? The real stuff. So sales guys have basically done their job, and they've basically brought in a new contract, and then for